Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a Boeing 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. Today we're going to look at the Crosswind Takeoff, and for that we're going to go pretty much all the way to the maximum with 30 knots of a straight crosswind, gusting up to 33 knots, which is the maximum allowed for the 737NG equipped with winglets. But first let's start with a little bit of theory. So, the first thing we'll have to think of when we are looking at a crosswind takeoff is the directional control. It is important that you align the airplane exactly with the runway and that you apply smooth and symmetrical thrust when you're spooling up the engines, which is then going to result in good crosswind control capability during the takeoff. Light forward pressure on the control columns should be maintained until 80 knots. And that is really going to aid your steering, since the rudder only really starts getting effective at about 60 knots of airspeed, and prior to that the nose wheel steering that is applied through the rudder pedals is going to be your primary aid in directional control. Any deviation from the center line should be counted immediately but smoothly with positive control inputs. So that means don't just jerk the rudder all the way to the maximum, but apply it in a smooth and steady manner. Also be aware that those of you who have done maximum crosswind takeoffs on previous simulators like FSX or P3D, you will notice something new happening in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and that is that the aircraft is really going to bank. So you will need control wheel displacement into the wind in order to keep your wings level. When you start the takeoff roll, you start with a control wheel just slightly extended into the wind, but as the speed increases you'll also have to increase your control wheel deflection in order to keep the wings level. But be aware that as you deflect the control wheel, the spoilers are going to come up to assist in the roll control, and that on the other hand side is causing additional drag and reduced lift, thereby decreased tail clearance. Those of you who have seen my takeoff on those of you who have seen my video on the normal takeoff will notice that tail clearance is a bit of a factor in the 737, especially in the longer bodied versions, so be careful with the maximum control wheel displacements. However, always use as much aileron as you need to keep the wings level. That has absolute priority. The aircraft only needs around about 8 degrees of bank in order for the engine to strike the runway, and we don't want that to happen. As you are then going to lift off, you will notice that the control wheel is going to displace into the opposite direction of your rudder pedals, so you will be in a crossed control situation, so in a side slip, so to say. And once you're airborne, you will smoothly return the rudder to the center position and then use the ailerons to maintain wings level while you do this. In the optimum case, that results in centering both rudder and aileron approximately at the same rate to reach the centered position at the same point in time. But that's the theory. The practical term is that you will usually need aileron in order to keep the aircraft wings level. And since we are flying an airplane with a track up display, like the one you can see here in my photo, you will notice that when you follow this correctly, the track is going to stay approximately the same, while you will be able to see the heading bug going into the wind. And with maximum crosswind, you're looking at about 15 degrees of crab angle. So the nose pointing 15 degrees into the wind. One more thing we have to talk about is gusty wind and strong crosswind conditions. So, first of all, as a matter of tail track prevention, my airline, just like many other airlines, introduced a policy that you are not going to use the assumed temperature method for thrust reduction on a takeoff when the crosswind exceeds 10 knots. So that means you're going to go either full 20k, full 22k, full 24k, full 26k or 27k, whatever is installed on the particular variant of the aircraft you're operating. Today we're flying a 700, so 24k is going to be what we have on these engines. Be aware that especially when the wind is coming in an almost 90-degree angle to the runway, like it is in today's video, the possibility of wind shifts resulting in gusty tailwind component during rotation of liftoff increases. So, during this condition, consider the use of thrust settings close to or at maximum takeoff thrust. The more thrust you are using, the better your safety margins are going to be and the greater your tail clearance is going to be on the takeoff. Should a gust strike you right during rotation, you can momentarily delay the rotation to bring the airplane through the gust and then start rotating. So let's quickly look into some numbers for that. I have already prepared the onboard performance tool. Note that this example serves for a 737-800, but I've set it to the exact takeoff conditions that we have here, and I've used the wind shear rating for takeoff thrust. And note that when you're using a wind shear rating, number one, it's going to give you full thrust. So this one is for a 737-800, so full 26k. But then, look at the rotation speed here. It is going to give you a delayed rotation speed. And let me quickly explain what that means. We've calculated our takeoff with 64 tons of weight here. But what the onboard performance tool is doing, if you're using the wind shear rating, it calculates that depending on the conditions and the thrust setting, what is the maximum takeoff weight going to be? So in this case, it's most likely going to be 77,990 kilos. And then it calculates what the rotation speed would be for that weight. So that you get a performance limited rotation speed here. So the normal rotation speed is 137 knots. But you can delay it all the way to 146 knots in order to increase your safety margins on the takeoff. Alright, keep in mind, those values here are for the 737-800. We're flying the 700, so our speeds are slightly different. Let's have a quick look here. We have wet runway conditions, so V1 123, we rotate 133, and V2 is 140. I'm going to use a delayed VR up to 140 knots as well, since the delayed VR must never be greater than V2. Alright, I'm going to place my view slightly more downward than usual, so that you can see the control column here, and therefore that you can get an idea of what I'm doing on the controls while we're taking off. Alright. So we've talked a lot about the theory. Let's go to the practical point of view now and start doing this takeoff. So let's quickly arm LNAV. Alright, so 240, 240, timing. Stabilized. Set takeoff thrust. Note the forward control column that I'm applying now. Note how the airplane is slowly trying to deviate from the runway center line. I will just add a little bit of control wheel displacement, and you'll need more and more as the speed increases. And see how much aileron you need now in order to keep the wings level. Now we'll return the rudder to the center position. You can see how the track stays almost the same, while the nose is actually starting to point into the wind. Alright. From now on, it's just the normal takeoff sequence, and this shall already conclude our tutorial. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. If you did, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, I'm looking forward to see you on the next video. Thank you very much, and I wish you all a great weekend, or upcoming great weekend if you're watching this at a later point in time.